Hello world. A lot of games have been said to have aged really poorly since their release. Many classic games are now just viewed as not as good as they used to be. Not because they were bad games initially, it's just as technology evolves and as games grow better, the flaws in the older ones tend to stand out a lot more. Even a lot of N64 games nowadays, which is still generally viewed as a very good console, just are a little bit harder to play nowadays.
But there is one console that has remained below them all in terms of replayability nowadays, the Atari 2600. While most consoles around this time were relatively primitive, this one stands out, at least to me. Recently, I tried getting into some of these games, and I can tell you with absolute certainty now, I'd rather have Lice than an Atari 2600.
This is great!
Let's take a look at the absurd Atari library, and what exactly passes a video game when there were absolutely no standards to be met. What games did we get for this system, and how do they hold up nowadays? We got Cookie Monster Crunch, go home. Oh, we'll get to that. But first, let's take a look at Alligator People.
Okay, now what?
This was the first of the bizarre specimens we're taking a look at today. It's supposedly based on the 1959 movie of the same name, which is unimportant to the game entirely. The game was never officially released, but unlike some of the other games we're going to take a look at, I actually kind of enjoyed this one. You have to escape these little crunchy alligator people while stuck in this ever-shifting maze. The walls move all around you and you have to evade them, which is kind of a cool idea, especially for the time. You also have to collect these sticks, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that information. Okay, so apparently these alligators used to be our main character and player's friends, but they were transformed. And these are the antidotes for the transformation, and this is a swamp.
That's great. I love playing pretend, but come on, no one's gonna look at this glorified corn maze and think of a swamp.
All in all, this game isn't bad. The idea is a little out there, but this is one of the more playable Atari classics. It's kind of fun, especially for the fact that it was made decades ago. Anyway, moving on to tax avoiders. There's only so much that the human mind can take. No, this isn't a joke. There's a game for the Atari 2600 where you have to run from the IRS. The game stars John Q, I already forgot his name, who has the simple goal of making $1 million in a year. Yeah, this guy, he's got some big dreams.
Now, don't lie, we've all committed tax evasion at some point, and we all know how it goes.
For me, personally, riding disappearing elevators and dodging giant red pieces of string were a big part of it. This is the first section of gameplay out of a whopping 2, where you have to collect green dollar signs and avoid these things. They come by so quickly, you really can't do anything to control the outcome, and you don't exactly lose by collecting too many of the red things. The game just keeps going, even if you don't try. This lasts a few minutes or several in-game months. Then, the game abruptly moves to Phase 2. Compared to how simple Phase 1 was, this I don't understand. I guess I could just read the manual, but, you know. Instead, I'll read the Wikipedia page out for you. The other phase has the player move around to manage his investments while another sprite oscillates between an Internal Revenue Service agent, or IRS, a certified public accountant, or CPA, and an investment advisor. If the player is caught by an IRS agent, he is audited, and he always loses the audit, which takes 50% of his income. If he encounters the CPA, he is charged a fee, but gains new tax-sheltered investment options. If he encounters the investment advisor, he can maximize his tax-sheltered investment returns.
This is a video game that exists!
But come on, this is such a fun and obscure title, and for that I love it. It's kind of annoying that the game is so random. I think if it was just a bit slower paced, which sounds lame, but whatever, I think then it would be a lot better. A lot more manageable to play, and a lot more skill would be involved. This feels like some sort of ironic title that would be put out nowadays, like, ooh, a game about tax evasion, isn't that funny? Like, who would do that?
I think I might know.
Moving on to Bachelor Party. Oh, nope, we can't do that. Moving on to Beat 'em and Eat 'em. Oh, no. Moving on to Custer's Revenge. I can't even mention that one. Moving on to X-Men. Okay, that should be fine. Everybody loves the X-Men.
Nope, not that one either.
Yeah, Atari, to my surprise, had some more adult-themed games on the system. While in most of the advertising this was said to be a system for the whole family, there were some notorious ones in the bunch that, weren't. Here's an interesting idea, though. How about controlling video games with your mind? No need for a controller, or even hand tracking. Just think of what to do, and it'll happen. Sounds fascinating. Want to know something even more fascinating? They tried it in the 80s, and it was complete trash. The Atari MindLink was an unreleased controller for the 2600 that you strapped to your face. It's extremely rare now, and only a few prototypes exist. It was made to detect brain signals and face movements to control the game with no buttons. Needless to say, it was terrible. Like another familiar piece of ambitious tech that was just too ambitious for its time, it was said to produce headaches soon after being strapped on because users had to move their eyebrows to control the game. You heard that right. The goal was using players' minds to play, and they ended up with eyebrow twitches. But hey, this thing wasn't that bad.
Now I can play beat 'em and eat 'em with my face.
But of course, we couldn't talk about Atari 2600 games without covering the infamous E.T. the Extraterrestrial, the game. Largely viewed as the worst game of all time, having a mass burial of its cartridges in the middle of the desert and gathering hate even to this day, this is one game that must be very, very bad. And so, naturally, I'm here today to tell you that I didn't think it was so awful, at least not compared to the other games in this console's library. E.T. follows a somewhat different plot from its movie counterpart, and requires E.T. to collect 3 pieces of an interplanetary telephone. Now here's the fun part. Everything you do in this game, walking, falling, flying, it all uses energy. You start with 10,000 energy and it goes down fast. The only way to get some energy back is by collecting Reese's Pieces. That's right, Reese's Pieces were blatant product placement in the movie, but in this game they're an integral part of the central gameplay. Reese's Pieces are an integral part of the central gameplay. Are you kidding me? But I mean, other than that, it's pretty good. I actually enjoyed this game a fair bit. It's a bit annoying falling into pits so often, but you get better as you play, and collecting the telephone isn't too tricky. After that, there's no semblance of a clue as to what to do, but I figured it out after a ton of trial and error. From what I've played, this is actually one of the better games for the system, in my opinion. And I really can't figure out what makes it that much worse than the other games we've covered. Or even the other games for the system. I guess just because it was marketed so furiously, expectations were higher, but I mean, come on guys, it's a movie game. It was always supposed to be trash. Here in the 21st century, we've learned our lesson. The Atari 2600 was a strange beast. It sold at only $199, or $850 in today's money, and it was pricey. The games aren't amazing now, and something like the NES is generally so much easier to go back to, but a lot of these games are playable, and some can even be enjoyable. I'm shocked I found myself enjoying many of the games I played while making this video, and only some made it into the final cut. Overall, if you have the time, check them out. Download an emulator or something. I don't care. The system's been around for 50 years, and going back to it, while generally somewhat unpleasant, is an experience I think you should try if you're interested in the history behind all of this. Don't expect to have buckets of fun. This is more of a quick novelty to me, anyways. But you can find some enjoyment here.
Well, I'm glad to be done talking about that one. Now I can never talk about this console again, which is going to be great. Everything after this was basically perfect. I mean, there were no strange games, nothing with any weird choices, certainly not for the NES. So, yep. I think that's about it. Won't be having to do this anytime soon. You've got to be kidding me. 1 second.